Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, Wealth Wednesdays. Um, Welcome to today's Wealth Wednesdays, where information becomes empowerment and knowledge becomes protection. Today's conversation is not just about numbers, it's about freedom, it's about stability, it's about understanding the systems that impact our financial future and learning how to navigate them with confidence. We are honored to welcome Rachel L. Kaylie, Esquire. Rachel is an attorney licensed to practice law in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Washington, D.C. Her primary areas of practice include bankruptcy, personal injury, and commercial litigation, fields that sit directly at the intersection of financial challenge and financial recovery. With her main office in Brooklyn and a satellite office in the Valley Stream, Long Island, Rachel serves individual and businesses navigating some of the most stressful financial moments of their lives. She understands how debt affects families. She understands how credit shapes opportunity. And she understands how the law can be used not just defensively, but strategically. Today, she will guide us through a critical discussion on credit scores, debt, and financial health. This is about breaking cycles. This is about protecting assets. This is about rebuilding wisely. Please join me in welcoming the powerhouse, Miss Rachel L. Kaylie, Esquire.
Hi, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
the
you,
opportunity to
Rachel.
be here.
We are so glad to have you here as Juneteenth NYC Wealth Wednesdays. We look forward to the information that you are presenting. Just going to have a call to action conversations.
That sounds great. I very much like to
So
educate
we'll
the
start
public
out
about the
with
business of it.
just a little bit. Thank you. So we'll start out with a couple of interview questions that we'll guide our conversations around. So one would be, why do you believe credit education is so misunderstood in our communities?
That is not only a great question, it's a great question to start the conversation. I've always been a big believer in educating young people, junior high and high school, about credit because good financial habits start at that age. Most schools, unfortunately, do not really teach much about financial literacy. And across the country, I think it's a real disservice to all communities to not teach this all important topic. So I think one of the biggest reason that credit education is misunderstood is because it's either taught poorly or not taught at all. And a lot of the times when it is taught in the household, it is taught by parents who also don't understand or don't know much about credit. And it's also a conversation a lot of adults don't like to have with children because they have this mistaken idea that children don't understand. And children do understand. All people understand money. It might have to be a tailored conversation for a child, but good, healthy financial habits start with good, healthy education, and that starts in the home and in the schools. So I think the reason it is so misunderstood is because it's a cycle of miseducation, uneducation, and frankly, just a cycle of bad habits.
Thank you. Now, what would you suggest as far as you're right, it does start at the home, but most of our communities are just struggling to make it. So, what would be your call to action as far as um, what could we do to educate the home in making better decisions? Therefore, they can teach their children how to make better decisions with money.
Well, that's also a great question. I think one of the ways we can start as a community is for community based financial education seminars or classes. It doesn't have to be over a long period of time. It could be a 1 day class, it could even be just a couple hours. I know that there are a lot of organizations, a lot of churches and synagogues, mosques where people gather, and in addition to the regular religious services, will have other programs. And if they have a program on financial literacy, the congregations of those institutions can really learn a lot and then pass it on. Not only learn a lot, but learn how to pass that on to their children and their other friends who are not part of that community. There are definitely programs. A lot of local libraries will have these types of programs, and religious institutions, service organizations, organizations such as Juneteenth. Sometimes schools will have these types of. My son, when he was in fourth grade, I went into his classroom, and the teacher had me talk to the kids for about an hour and a half about credit. They understand. They really know. If you explain to them, they get it. And I think that, when parents learn about it, children learn about it. So I think looking into your local communities to see what kind of programs. Some banks also offer like wealth management or credit management seminars and classes. So if you bank at a larger bank like Chase or Citibank, I believe they offer financial literacy type classes as well. So there's a wealth of resources. It's just that a lot of people don't know about them.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct. There is a wealth of resources, and that's one of the goals that we're trying to do is just kind of bridge that gap in letting people know where the resources are, uh, so they won't really have to really search for anything. That, here's the information. A lot of places, you're right, they don't know where to go and look. So that's one of our goals, is to bridge that gap for the resources. Thank you.
Absolutely. Another way, another source for that kind of information is to go on the three credit reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, and you go on their websites and they have information as well about what is credit, what goes into credit, things like that. So it's a good place to start, and it's available to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, let's follow up with what are the biggest myths people have about credit scores?
So a lot of people think that having a really high credit score is the be all and end all to getting a mortgage, a car finance, things like that. It is very important indeed, but a lot of times the mortgage bank or the car finance doesn't just look at your credit score. They look at your income, they look at your financial resources, things like that. So a credit score is very important, but it is not the only thing that is considered when applying for a mortgage or a car finance or other types of loans. Not all debt gets reported. So, one thing that people don't always understand or know about credit scores is that, their credit scores are actually reported by the individual creditor. So, credit card companies, mortgage banks, car finance companies, those all report. But there are other sources as well. For instance, if you have a landlord, usually a larger landlord that owns, multiple properties, can report your on time payments of your rent to the credit companies, credit card, agencies, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, and that can help boost your credit. So if you have a landlord, if you're like most New Yorkers and you're renting, your rent payments can be reported by your landlord. If you ask your landlord, they will probably oblige and report. So even if you have somewhat shaky credit, if you have good on time payments to your landlord for your rent, ask your landlord, can you please report this to the credit reporting agencies? That is definitely a way to help. So that's one of the myths. Another myth about your credit score really ties into what I do, which is bankruptcy. And a lot of times people will come to me about bankruptcy and they'll say, oh, it's going to ruin my credit forever. And that's not true. Bankruptcy will stay on your credit report for 10 years. Most credit stays on your credit report for 7 years. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when you file for bankruptcy, it will actually raise your credit score, not lower it, because you will have gotten rid of a lot of debt. So that's another myth about your credit. A lot of times people also think, yes, something will stay on your credit report for 7 years, but debt gets bought and sold all the time. So you might have a credit card, let's say, for example, with Citibank, and Citibank might sell that credit card debt if you haven't paid it, might sell it to a creditor. And that starts the 7 year clock all over again. So you have to be careful with that because debt does get bought and sold all the time. Student loans get bought and sold all the time, things like that. And that's something you have to be aware of when counting the 7 year clock.
All right, thank you, Rachel. And that's a trending thought about the student loans here. I see a lot of that in the news that's going on with uh, trying to figure out the back pay and all that, who they sold it to and all that. So that's a lot. That's a whole different podcast.
It is, and it's honestly it's a huge issue because a lot of people they thought they were paying to company A, and a year later it's company B, and the payment history doesn't always get transferred. So that's something you really need to stay on top of who you owe, how much you owe, and when you pay it because debt gets does get bought and sold all the time. So student loans is something, it's a whole nother podcast, you're right. And I think, a lot of times too, parents will co-sign student loans for their adult children and the children default on those loans and the parents don't know that, but the parents are equally responsible. So all of
Right.
a sudden, the parent thinks that the adult child has been paying their student loans all along, and then all of a sudden they look at their credit score or their credit history and see that that's not true, and if it affects their own credit. So anytime you co-sign a loan, a student loan, a car loan, a mortgage, a private loan, a line of credit, definitely you want to make sure that you keep on top of the payments because if somebody else is supposed to be paying it and they don't, you're equally responsible, and that will go on your credit report.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, can you elaborate? I think you have touched some points on this, but could you elaborate a little bit on how exactly is a credit score calculated and what
Absolutely.
impacts it the most?
It's a very technical way, and how credit is actually calculated. There are like three people on the planet who know the actual formula, but the general breakdown is your credit score is rated between 300 and 850. 850 being the highest and the best credit. Anything credit over 700 is generally considered good credit. Credit over 800 is generally considered excellent credit. Credit under 700, between 6 and 700 is fair. Anything below 600 is just generally bad credit. The way your score is calculated is actually pretty specific. The absolute most important part about the calculation is the payment history. That is 35% of the formula of how credit score is calculated. Do you have a good payment history? Have you always paid on time? If you miss one payment in 4 years, that's not a big deal. But if you miss a lot of payments, or you have a lot of late payments, or no payments, that will 35% of your credit score is your payment history. Another big one, 30%, is how much do you owe? So if you owe, $10,000 in debt, that's not nearly as bad if you owe 100,000 in debt. So the amount you owe is 30%. That's a huge portion of how a credit score is calculated. The other factors are the length of credit history. So younger people, people turning 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, have a very short credit history, if any. And the length of your credit history is 15% of the calculation. The older you are, the longer you've been acquiring credit, paying credit on time, things like that is a nice boost for your credit score. Then about 10% of your credit score is the mix of credit that you have. Is it all credit card? Do you have car finance? Do you have a mortgage? Do you have student loans, private loans, things like that? The type of credit you have, the more mixed and varied it is, the more it will boost your credit score. So if your credit is only credit card, your credit score is not as likely to be good as someone who has credit card and car loans and things like that. So the type of credit that you have is about 10% of the calculation. And finally, the other 10% is how often you get new credit cards and how often there are hard inquiries. So a lot of times people think, oh, I'm just going to
Mhm.
keep getting a new credit card and I'll transfer the balance and things like that. Well, each time you apply for a credit card, whether you're accepted or not, it's a hard inquiry. And the more inquiries there are, the more that's going to negatively affect or impact your credit score. So, doing things like getting lots and lots of credit cards over a short period of time is not good. It's not helpful. It does not, it negatively impacts your credit score. Opening up lots of new credit cards over a short period of time, again, negatively impacts your credit score. So, if you have 5 or 6 credit cards and you want to keep opening credit cards, that's not going to help you. And eventually that gets diluted and you're less likely to get accepted, or the credit, if you do get accepted, the credit limit is very limited. So I generally recommend not doing that. If you shop around for the best rates and they run your credit. Let's say you're buying a car and you want to finance the car and you don't know if the
Mhm.
car dealership's finance or another company's finance is the best. The more you shop around, each time they run your credit score, that's going to negatively affect. Same as a mortgage. A lot of times people will shop around for the best mortgage they can get, and each time that your credit report is run by the mortgage bank or the lender, that's going to negatively affect your credit. So it's a small percentage, it's 10%, but it does affect your credit. So that's how the calculation is broken down. And
And
another
that's
thing about that is that your credit score can fluctuate. So from month to month, your credit gets updated. I think it's every 30 days or 45 days, depending on the credit reporting agency. And if you have, let's say you have a $10,000 credit card debt and you pay off, your credit score is going to be lower. But if you pay off 5,000 of it, that's going to raise your credit score. You have to
mm,
give it time for the calculations to be put in there. That's why it takes 30 to 45 days. But the more you can pay off and the lower amount of credit that debt that you have will definitely raise your credit score. On things that can lower it, again, new credit cards, hard inquiries, um, all of a sudden owing a lot when you haven't owed a lot for a while. And that often happens. A lot of times people have major medical debt and
Mhm.
insurance doesn't necessarily cover it. And that's a huge problem because a lot of people don't have good insurance coverage and then have a catastrophic medical issue. And they end up having to put all that medical debt on credit card. And they went from good credit to not so good credit. And it's unfortunate, but unfortunately, the insurance in this country is needs to be revised. Let's just say. But those are
I
some
totally
things
agree.
to impact, your credit. I just want to add
Yeah.
one other aspect about when I talked about the length of your credit, which I said is
Mhm.
about 15% of the calculation. New adults, people 18 and older, you can't have credit before you're 18 because a credit card is a contract. A mortgage is a contract. A car finance is a contract. And you can't legally sign a contract or agree to a contract unless you're 18 or older. So that's why a lot of times, kids 16, 17 years old want to get a credit card in their name to build credit, and they can't because you can't sign a contract at that age. What I recommend to parents, and I've done this for my own son, and it really helps a lot. You, as the parent, if you have a credit card and you have good credit, you can make your child at any age an authorized user on the credit card. Now, that doesn't mean they're responsible for the credit card. It just means you're saying, I'm allowing my child at 16 years old. I mean, I would recommend it for a young child, but a middle to older teenager, and they build on your credit. So if you have a good credit score, you can make your under adult child, 14, 15, 16, an authorized user. Let them use the card, buy some groceries, go to a movie, pay it in full, and then they will start to establish credit. So their payment history is based off of yours. So if you have good credit, you're basically passing your good credit down to your child, your older child, and they start to build credit so that when they turn 18 and they want to, go off to college or a new job or whatever, they have an easier time of getting their own credit card because they have started to build
Mhm.
credit under based on you. So that affects the length of credit history. So that is something, a lot of parents don't know about. And it's
Mhm.
really a very responsible and slow way to start to build credit at a very young age. And the key word being responsible. So you want to make sure your children don't take the credit card and run off to town and start buying everything under the sun. You want to put a limit with them, but it is a good way to teach them about credit. You make sure that they
Yes.
pay it off each month, whatever they've spent, so they understand how to use a credit card. And it's a good way for parents to start to help their child build their own length of credit history.
That was a wonderful breakdown, Miss Rachel. And I can testify to that not being taught in the schools or the
No, it's
parents being aware of that. And also, that is a wonderful way to help build the child's credit by having them as an authorized user if that person's credit is good as well. So
that's
that
right.
is an excellent way in teaching our young people ways to build credit.
And how to pay it. A lot of times,
Yes.
if you have the child on the 15th of the month, if they spent $40 at the movies or wherever they went, you make sure they know by the 15th of the month they must pay you that $40 or you're going to start charging interest. So that's
Yes.
the way to start teaching good healthy credit habits at a younger age. And I just wanted to bring back one other thing, when we're talking about the myths about credit scores. One
Uh-huh.
of the other things that I get clients and people asking me all the time, if I just cancel my credit card, do I still have to pay it? And that's a myth. Yes, of course you have to pay it. What would stop everybody from doing that? So it's a lot of people ask me that question. But, it kind of seems like it makes sense. Well, I canceled it. Why would I pay it? But you do. Just because you cancel a credit card doesn't mean you don't have to pay it. Since we're on the topic of length of his credit history, canceling a credit card or closing a credit card once it's paid in full negatively impacts your credit
Mm.
because it shortens the length of your credit history. So, generally, what I tell people, if you have a zero balance, let's say you have three credit cards and you really only use two of them, and one of them was there, you paid it off in full, it's got a zero balance. If you don't use that credit card periodically over time, that credit card company will close the card, and that will decrease your length of credit history, and that will negatively impact. What I generally advise people is, if you have a credit card that you pretty much never used before, use it once every few months, buy some groceries, buy gas for your car, something small, but at least you're using it, pay it in full. Keep the zero balance, but don't close it out. Don't let them close it on you, because that will also negatively impact your credit score.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Miss Rachel is definitely dropping some diamonds that we all can use. So I really appreciate this conversation. Um, so let's follow on through with how can someone begin repairing their credit after financial hardships? Um, for example, we were talking about the the medical insurance, and if up with a condition insurance doesn't cover, like what would be the first process steps repairing it?
All right, so generally, given what I told you, what the breakdown of how your credit score is calculated, rebuilding
Hmm.
your credit and repairing your credit takes time. I think the most important thing you can do when you are trying to repair your credit after a financial hardship is be patient, because it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 3 or 4 months. It could take a year, it could take a couple years, and that's okay. You can slowly and responsibly start to rebuild and repair your credit by doing things like showing a good payment history. So, a lot of times, some of the biggest reasons people have a poor payment history is unemployment, underemployment, a devastating medical emergency or issue, and divorce. Divorce is one of the biggest reasons all of a sudden people's credit goes from good to bad, because you have the same income that was once one household is now two households. A lot of times in a divorce, one spouse is still responsible for the credit of the other as part of the divorce agreement, and sometimes that spouse just doesn't pay it. So those are some of the main reasons why people end up in financial hardship, and a lot of that is really just slowly making sure that your payments are on time, trying your very best to lower the amount you owe. Those are the two biggest factors. So, cutting back on certain expenses. A lot of times people put, expenses on their credit card when they really have the money right there. Put it on your debit card. Your debit card is yours. It does not go on your credit score. So, if you're going to go to Starbucks every day and buy your latte every day, don't put it on a credit card, put it on a debit card. And those things add up. So I use Starbucks generally as an example. If you're going to go to Starbucks every day and you buy their $7 latte, or let's say a $5 latte, because I can do the math, you buy it 5 days a week. That's $25 a week. That's $100 a month for coffee that you can make at home. And that starts to add up on your credit report if you use your credit card instead of a debit card. So watching what you spend it on, and watching, trying to cut back. Make your own coffee. Don't drink coffee. Switch to lemon water. Um, you know, there are ways that you can make little cuts, but those little cuts really add up, and that reduces the amount you owe. The other way, especially to reduce the amount you owe and starting to repair your credit, is to pay off more than just the minimum balance. So, a lot of times, every single month you owe $11,000, your minimum payment is 232. Well, if you can, pay 300. If you can, pay 500. When you start to
Hmm.
save that little bit of extra money by not going to buy coffee, make your own sandwich. Don't buy a $15 sandwich, make your own sandwich. You can make your own sandwich for $2. Use that extra money, set it aside. Use that money to pay down your debt even quicker. And that's one of the best ways to repair your credit after a financial hardship, if you're able to do it. And most people are able to do it if you really give a hard look at what you spend your money. Most people don't look at their statements every month at their list of what they bought. Look at what you bought and say, "Oh my goodness, did I really need that? Did I really need this?" Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. So when you really do a hard look at your actual budget and not what you think it is, but what it actually is, that's a great way to start to begin to repair your credit after a financial hardship. And
Ooh,
and
thank
another
you.
thing too, if you are able, or if you have the resources, ask a family member or friend if they can loan you a few thousand, and you pay them back over time, but without interest, if they're willing and able to do it. A lot of times parents will help their kids, or a sibling might help a sibling. And that's another way. Not everybody can do that, and it's not ideal, because you're just really borrowing from one person to pay another. But if you can do it with zero interest versus
Right.
high interest. And that's another thing. Look at your credit card. Look at the interest rate. The worse your credit is, the higher the interest you're going to pay. So the
Hmm.
more you can repair your credit, the more you're going to get lower your interest rate. And an interest rate of 10% versus
Okay.
20% on a $10,000 balance is huge. It's huge. So those are things that you can start to
Yes.
do to repair your credit after financial. You know.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we're going to take a break from the questions. Production has told me that we've got some viewers' questions, and I'm going to let them project it on the screen so that you can answer their questions. So, James, you can go ahead. Um, I think the first one is, can card debt be included with bankruptcy?
That's a great question, and that's something that most people who own cars. It's like one of the first things they ask me. I'm in South Brooklyn. A lot of people here have cars. A lot of parts of Manhattan, people don't have cars, but it is a big issue with the bankruptcy. The short answer is yes. So if you owe car debt, let's say you no longer own the car, so the car was repossessed, the car was in an accident and was totaled, but you still owe on the finance. So in other words, if you bought a car in 2022 and you're financing it and the car was totaled in an accident, you still owe the finance on that car, even if you don't have the car anymore. That is a debt that is fully dischargeable in bankruptcy. Now, a lot of times people want to keep their car in bankruptcy, and often you can do that. There are things you can do, such as depends on the value of the car. That's usually calculated by the Kelley Blue Book value. The older the car, the better. In bankruptcy, the exemption to keep a car, an exemption is the amount you're allowed to keep despite the bankruptcy. So the car exemption in bankruptcy is currently, I think, in New York about $5,000 or so. That means if you have a really old car, a 2012 or whatever, and you want to keep your car and you're not financing it anymore, if the car has no value over the exemption, you can keep the car. If you have a car that's fairly new and you're financing it and you want to keep the car, In a bankruptcy, what will happen is you will reaffirm the debt and you will keep the car and you will continue to make the monthly car payments. You can do that and keep the car. Even if the car is worth $20,000, if you owe 23,000 on it, if the trustee in bankruptcy were to sell the car, the only person who would get money would be the car finance company, and they don't want your car, they want your money. So, most often in a bankruptcy, you can keep your car if you want to, regardless of the age, if it's old, or regardless of the age if you're financing it. If you're that in between where you have a lot of value in the car and not financing it anymore, or very little left on financing it, then we'd have to have a different discussion. But most people fall into one of the two other categories. But if you, and I've had several clients who had cars that were, they loaned it to a friend and the friend got into an accident. That debt is fully dischargeable.
Okay, thank you. And I
Mhm.
do believe we have another question. Um, how does bankruptcy work? Does all of your debt go into bankruptcy, or can you choose what debt goes into it? What is the difference between chapter 7 and chapter 13? And I love this question. I can't see. Oh, Miss Taisha, I love this question.
Hi, Taisha.
Miss Rachel is going to come and do a whole another podcast
I
on
know Taisha.
bankruptcy. So,
She's my love.
girl,
How are
we
you?
in there.
So bankruptcy, the difference between chapter 7 and 13, chapter 7 is known as liquidation. If you have any assets that are not exempt, exempt means you get to keep them. If you have any assets that are not exempt, the trustee in bankruptcy can take them and sell them and use them to pay their creditors. Chapter 13, you get to keep all your assets, including a house, and you make a payment plan over a 3 to 5 year period. In order to qualify for a Chapter 13, though, you have to have income over and above your regular expenses so that you can make payments to your creditors on a payment plan. Most people do not qualify for a 13, and very often the ones who are in 13, they get converted to a 7 or dismissed because they just simply can't make the payment plan. So Chapter 13 is often used as a tool if your house is in foreclosure, because in the 13 you keep your house. In a 7, you can keep up to 205,000 of the equity in your house. Equity is the value of your house over and above any liens, like a mortgage or tax lien, anything like that. You can keep your house in a Chapter 7 under certain circumstances. And most of my clients who own real property qualify for a 7, even if they own a house. Chapter 13 is often used in a foreclosure because when you file bankruptcy, there's what's called the automatic stay. And the automatic stay means whoever is trying to collect money from you, even on the eve of a foreclosure. I've had cases where I filed the 13 the morning of the sale of the house and it stops the sale. And then you can try to work with the mortgage bank through the Chapter 13. Very often it doesn't work because the reason you got into the foreclosure to begin with is because you just didn't have the money to pay it. But there are tools that you can use, such as loss mitigation, through the bankruptcy court that are very effective. And the bankruptcy court can put a lot of pressure on the mortgage lender to work with you to refinance the loan. Whereas without the pressure of the bankruptcy court, you might not be as successful. So that's the basic difference between the Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Can you pick and choose what debt goes into it? Absolutely not. It's either all or nothing. If you owe debt, you owe it to everybody. It's not fair. The basis behind that is it's not fair to some of your creditors that you're going to pay them and not pay others. So, no, if you file bankruptcy, all debt gets listed, even if it's to friends and family, it gets listed. Now, that doesn't mean you can't on your own pay family after the bankruptcy. So, very often, parents or a sibling or a friend will loan someone money to help them try to avoid bankruptcy. And it was just inevitable. And I have to list that person, but you can privately pay them. So, one of the things about bankruptcy that people don't really understand is what is the bankruptcy discharge? the discharge in bankruptcy, it doesn't mean that the debt goes away. It means that your obligation to pay the debt goes away. So if you have debt that you no longer have to pay, but you owe your mom $20,000, you can still pay it, but you don't have to. And that's what a discharge is. Now, the other thing about a discharge is if you um, have debt that gets listed and somebody else co signed that debt, a car loan, a mortgage, student loans, something else, credit card, something else, that other person who did not file is still responsible for the debt. So if you have joint debt, and I don't mean an authorized user, joint debt, that other person who didn't file is still responsible for the debt. Now, for most of my clients, they don't have joint debt. Most of them is just them. And it's effectively the same thing. Their obligation to pay that debt goes away. But not all debt is dischargeable in bankruptcy. Most taxes are not dischargeable. Student loans are virtually never dischargeable. Certain tax debt, like sales tax, if you are a business, is never dischargeable. Child support and alimony is never dischargeable under any circumstances, and child support and alimony are not subject to the automatic stay. So when you file it, there's the automatic stay. Everything comes to a stop. Tax debt, student loans, car loans, mortgages, all of that comes to a stop. Never child support or alimony. So I get calls all the time. I owe 50,000 in child support. I want to file bankruptcy. It's not going to help you. So no, you do not get to pick and choose what debt gets listed, and not all debt is dischargeable.
All right. Thank you. I've got a couple of more questions for you.
Sure.
That is from a viewer, but I don't think she's online. So
Okay.
I'm just going to read them to you right quick.
Sure.
Number one is how would a person resolve an account without an account number? And she specified like AT&T, and then how long would that be on the credit report?
Okay. So AT&T does give you an account number. So I'm not really sure. Anything like the utilities, Con Ed, National Grid, um, you know, the telephone companies, Verizon, AT&T, etc. They all have credit account numbers. So if you need to resolve that, you do have an account number, and you can call the utility or the phone company and explain to them what's happening. And sometimes it's the wrong person. There could be people, you know John Smith Jr. and John Smith Sr., and sometimes they mix them up, especially if they live in the same household, but they not don't have the same debt. So things like that happen all the time. And you need to take the account number that would be on the statement. If there's no account number, if you don't have a statement, then you can call the company and say, this is my social security number, this is my address, I'm not sure what the account number is, please help me. But those are
Okay.
generally best left to deal with directly with the utility or the telephone company.
Okay. Thank you. And then
Mhm.
the second one is the second question is kind of long, but I'll try to get through it. It looks like she was in a timeshare. She said Wyndham Timeshare, their paperwork states that there is a 6 day to cancel the contract. You must mail a letter certified with date within time. If the 6 day is a Sunday, then you have an extra day. Her 6 day was Columbus Day, and she didn't know until the night before that she had this option. So she sent it the day after Columbus Day. Post office was closed on Columbus Day. They refused to let her out of the contract because it was mailed the day after Columbus Day and would have been day 7. I think she said that was 2021. Columbus Day was on a Monday. She sent a certified letter on Tuesday, and they refused to pay it or haven't paid anything on it. Is there a way to get out of it or keep from affecting my credit? And what kind of lawyer would I need to contact in South Carolina to fight it? Because that's where her
So
timeshare is at. Well, I'm sorry.
yeah, timeshares are very tricky at best. They most of the time kind of have you over a barrel. Um, Chances are, because Columbus Day, the post office is always closed and it's always a Monday. If you want to cancel it, you need to do it like day one, two, or three. They kind of don't have to day seven. Their clear contract is clear. It only says Sundays. If the contract didn't say Sundays or federal holidays, there's not a lot you can do. You can try to negotiate it out. You can just simply not pay it and hope that they, will work with you to get out from under it. You can sell your timeshare. You'll probably lose money on it. Timeshares are tricky, and I'm very much not in favor of timeshares, frankly. I know a lot of people have them who love them, and it's great if you're the kind of person who really can use your timeshare. But if you're going to get into a timeshare, you've got to know in advance that it's very likely you're stuck with it for life. So be very leery of getting into a timeshare. Those contracts are pretty ironclad, and it can cost you a lot to try to get out of it. I don't know any specific attorneys who deal with that, but there are attorneys who deal with consumer fraud. And if you live in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bar Association, there's an organization that's part of it called Access Justice Brooklyn. I do a lot of pro bono work with them for the bankruptcy, but they have a lot of affairs attorneys as well. I would recommend contacting. It's called Access Justice Brooklyn, and I would contact them, tell them the timeshare situation, the consumer fraud situation, and they might be able to help you. Each borough has their own bar association. I don't know. I mean, I'm active with Brooklyn Bar because I'm in Brooklyn, but if you are in a different borough, contact the local bar association and tell them the situation. They have pro bono referral services, consumer fraud protection. You can also make a complaint to the New York State Department of Consumer Affairs. They might be able to guide you, certainly much better than I can, but I would definitely recommend stay away from timeshares if you can. They're really just a money suck, and they're hard to get out of. They're really hard to get out of.
Okay.
They sound great. Oh, it's only 11,000 a year, and I can always go to the Caribbean and relax in the sun wherever I want. But then it's all the other fees that go with it, and all this other stuff, and then you don't end up going to the Caribbean and all that. Timeshares are very tricky. Stay away. This is really the best advice I can give you on that.
Thank you, Miss Rachel. And we're going to end this with one more question. Um, this has been so enjoyable, and I look forward to working with you on more call to action conversations. This last question would be: what legal protections should consumers know about regarding debt collectors?
Okay. Debt collectors are predators. Like I said before, debt gets bought and sold all the time. So if you owe, let's say, a credit card on Chase, and after a while you haven't paid it, Chase will sell that to Joe Schmo Credit Collection Company. That credit card company bought the debt 50 cents on the dollar, something like that, and they will do everything within their power to try to scare you into paying the debt if you can't pay it. So they will threaten lawsuits, they will threaten your credit, they'll threaten your family, they'll threaten all kinds of things. Some of the things they're not allowed to say, sometimes they do anyway. you do not have to deal with them. However, if they own the debt, they can put that on your credit report. So you want to be very careful about that. Don't let them bully you. Don't let them threaten you. But do know that if they own the debt, they can eventually file suit against you. Now, what happens when they do that? First of all, if the debt is less than $1,000, the odds are very slim that they're ever going to do anything. What will happen is they'll eventually sell it to some other credit card, collection company, and eventually it'll just go away. Nobody's going to do anything. But that does stay on your credit report. If they do sue you, that's actually not that bad because what will happen is you can go to court, represent yourself. It's very easy. You go to the civil court in Brooklyn. It's at 141 Livingston Street, and you tell the judge, Judge, the debt is $2,000. I need to work out a payment plan. I can't pay this all at one time. And the judge will have a court attorney work with you to help you work out a payment plan with the credit card company or the debt collection company. You remember they make their money when they get the debt paid. So if they can get, let's say you owe $3,000, if you say, look, I'll give you 2,000 as a lump sum and forget the rest, they'll do that. Most likely they will say, okay, because they'd rather have 2,000 up front than maybe 3,000 later. Plus they have to hire an attorney to sue you, and then the attorney gets a portion, things like that. So if you can work out a deal where you pay either monthly or you pay a lump sum for less than the full amount, you usually can do that depending on the amount and depending on your ability to pay. What you must be aware of though, if you work out a deal, so let's say you owe, I'm making up a number, let's say you owe $10,000 on a credit card, and the credit card company or the debt collection company says to you, okay, we'll take $4,000 as a lump sum settlement. You say, great, I'll give you the 4,000, and the other 6,000 is forgiven. In a bankruptcy, that 4,000, that difference 6,000 is dischargeable debt. It does not, it is not taxable. If you work out a lump sum payment or a monthly payment on a credit card, and there's a different, let's say, like I said, 10,000, and you give them a lump sum of 4,000, that $6,000 that gets forgiven is taxable income to you, and they will send you a 1099. I shouldn't say will. They will most likely, they don't have to. They will most likely send you a 1099, and they'll send that to the IRS saying we forgave 6,000 in debt and you have to pay taxes on that. In bankruptcy,
Mm.
the debt that's forgiven is not taxable, but it is taxable income if you settle credit card debt for less than the amount that's owed. So that's something to be aware of. Also, that will go in your credit report as paid as settled. That will negatively impact your credit score as well. So a lot of times people think, okay, well I saved $6,000, but you're going to pay taxes on it, and it will impact your credit score because it will go on there. It won't say paid in full. It'll say paid as settled, and that negatively
Mm.
impacts your credit score. So if you're going to negotiate credit card debt, well, usually it's credit card. There's other forms of debt, but usually it's credit card. Be very careful of what you do because that could come back to. There's a lot of hidden aspects to that most people don't realize, and then all of a sudden they get a 1099 and they have to pay taxes on that $6,000 they thought they saved. So that's something to be very much aware of. And it'll be marked as paid as settled, not paid in full. So, that's something to be aware of that will definitely impact your credit.
Thank you so much. That is very, very good information. And as we close today's sessions, we are reminded that financial health is not accidental, it's intentional. Credit scores affect us where we live, debt affects us how we breathe, financial literacy affects how we build. Miss Rachel has shown us that understanding the law gives us leverage, understanding debt gives us options, and understanding credit gives us power. Financial wellness is not about perfection, it's about awareness, it's about accountability, and it's about informed decisions. Thank you, Miss Rachel, for helping us build a smarter and stronger financial foundation. And that's where it all starts, is at the foundation.
It
I
does.
really, really, really appreciate this. Um, we love you. Juneteenth, love you for this information. I want to give a shout out to our CEO of Juneteenth, Miss Athenia Rodney, for giving us this opportunity to
She's
share
an
this
asset.
information. I want to give a shout out to our production team, James, and all the VAs that have helped put this together. We love you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to more Wealth Wednesdays. Stay tuned, you all, because we've got them coming.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
the opportunity.